Welcome to our intro. This is where we insert our intro right here, where the intro goes.
Oh boy!
How's everybody doing?
Intro.
And that's lesson number 1: how to not procrastinate and wait for an intro.
Exactly. Just start. There we go. All right. Well. So yes, I called this meeting here today. Anyway, yeah. So I wanted to have a little DM. I guess DM advice panel, DM roundtable. I don't know what we'll call this, but just kind of sharing ideas of our style of DMing and like sort of brainstorming with each other. Because I feel like we have a lot of ideas that could be helpful. We all have vastly different styles for prepping sessions. We have vastly different styles for creating NPCs or scenarios or encounters. So I think the three of our brains put together with a decent, cool little conversation should be insightful for people.
Yes, and the three of us are...
Yes. Well, it's on my channel. So Black Chinchilla, Michael, here I am. This is I.
David Wilkerson, a.k.a. the Professor Heretic.
I shall keep my anonymity.
Anonymity.
Anonymity. Anonym. Yeah, I'm subsaccharine.
I guess with this one, maybe we can talk. Let's start off with. What would be a good spot to start?
Well, I guess we should probably start with letting everyone know exactly what makes us so different when it comes to our DMing styles.
Yes, Michael, what makes you so different?
What a loaded question. That's a loaded question. Well, I would say a lot of my DMing style for like usually when I'm planning sessions, I would come up with moments I'll come up with like little moments that I want to happen, and then those will basically inform the direction that I'll plan the session. And outside of that, like usually when I'm hosting a game, it's good for me, like if it's a homebrew game or I guess a game in general, it's good for me to know rules or the lore of the world that we're in, and then I can run an entire session with little to no prep, and still keep it interesting or fun or compelling in some type of way. Also, I'll kind of let the and I do encourage a lot of RP, and I encourage the players themselves to chime in little things to add into the scene. Like I'm very like yes and that little improv word, phrase, yes and. So like if somebody's like is there a table in this room? I'll say yes if it makes sense for it to be a table in the room without thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think the yes and method is really, really good for D&D specifically because it's a game about improv, and in a sense, what is a campaign but just an improv story and its barest essentials?
Yeah, group storytelling, essentially.
Yeah.
Your campaign seemed to be like light on the world building, but the world building's still there. Heavy on the characters, heavy on the downtime, the fun time, I guess you'd call it, because it's not downtime like a normal D&D session where you go shopping. It's like chill time where you just do whatever the hell and see what happens, and occasional small little story arcs with some thought out large story arc that supersedes it all, but it's not the focus. Like it's there, but it's not the main focus of every session. It just happens to be the thing that kind of drags us along, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think with Ash specifically, I do feel like it is very character driven more than it is story driven, and I think that works for that because it was, we wanted it to be a comedy series, so it wasn't really like a thing that needed to have like this deep dark plot to be super compelling. It just needed to be I think the characters drive it, like because I have a ton of wacky characters in Ass, and this all of it's just like that'd be a fun dude, and I'll just throw that in there.
That's what I mean. It's really loose. Like it's you just kind of let things happen, and instead of driving some sort of narrative along, you just kind of let things fall where they land.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that'll frustrate some people, but I work in that mild chaos really well. So
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's really good that like that. I think that's what makes our style so different is because well, when you prep, you said you do like light preparation, and I started to in the past couple of months do light preparation, but I still always have somewhat of like a I kind of overdo things on occasion where I take too many notes and write down too much about a plot, and I have too much on my sheet to even keep up with. And I feel like you don't have as much on your sheet as I, you know what I mean? I feel like you just kind of write down your characters and say, oh, here's my characters, here's my plot, and here's what I want to happen. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot like that whenever I do my prep, because I found if I write a script, I think I said this before to you, you specifically, that like if I write down a script, I have a hard time following it. But if I do bullet points, I'll be able to follow bullet points a lot easier. So if I just know what the character wants, then I can put them into the scene and then follow their motives a lot easier. Like I do plan what bad guys want or what, you know, the new NPC will want and stuff like that, but I don't have like their whole life story written out, and I know you do that sometimes because you shared some of it.
Yeah, sometimes it's I used to go, especially in Paradise, I would go a bit farther deep into the characters. With Curse of Strahd, a lot of that's there, so I would just write a couple of secrets, a couple of things that I don't want you to know right away but might come up, and I keep changing my methods because I keep finding problems. Like sometimes I find myself forcing dialogue in situations where it shouldn't be, just because the secret's there and I want you guys to know about it. So sometimes I'll force dialogue, which makes conversations not as organic. So I've tried to be a little less wordy about the secrets that I write down, so that I don't end up spouting them out verbatim, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. So how do you handle dialogue typically? Like, do you have like a method, or you're just swinging?
That's a good question. Dialogue.
I would say you're very responsive in the sense. I do know that usually dialogue is triggered through inclusive means, meaning the characters, like the party, would just be sitting there having a dialogue, and this NPC comes in. But I think it's really loose when it comes to the character conversations that the party would have with the NPC, or if the NPC wanted something from the party, it's not very subtle.
Yeah, so I do the yes and thing, sort of like Michael was talking about. But when we're doing Paradise, because it's recorded, I always felt the need to push things, especially with 8 people, sometimes 6 people on average, 8 people, sometimes 10 people at the worst. It could be really chaotic and really slow to listen to if there's not some sort of driving factor to kind of like, because we've talked about this multiple times when we have 8 or 10 people not knowing which direction to go, like nobody knows what the goal is. So I find myself having to use an NPC to kind of insert some sort of goal and drive things along. But lately I've just been writing sort of motivations and things about those characters, and like that whole conversation with the Mardikovs, I just basically had written a bunch of little notes about what sort of the internal issues were between all of them, and also different rumors, and I just tried to figure out ways to fit those in throughout without being too pushy.
I gotcha. Yeah, I think your NPC, I think that method probably works pretty well, because I think the conversation that we were having in Curse of Strahd were a lot smoother than the Paradise ones.
Yeah.
But I get why you were doing it, just because it was like recorded. But yeah, I think I remember the session with in Paradise when we were when we first got to Cholt. And like we were sitting there having dinner, and then you had every NPC that we were supposed to meet walk in and interrupt our dinner while we were RPing, just trying to get to know each other. So that was like, oh man, all these people, so much information. It's information overload.
When you got to Cholt and you were eating dinner?
Yeah, we got to like a what was it?
Oh,
we
the
got
bar.
to it. Yeah, the
allow
bar,
me
yeah.
to say, in the meantime, possible spoilers for the following campaigns:
That's okay.
Curse of Strahd, was
Curse
it
of
Tomb of
Strahd's not
Annihilation?
recorded, but Tomb of Annihilation, yeah.
Or for other people, I guess.
Yeah,
For when they run it.
yeah, because people might be coming here for DM advice or whatever wish if they wanted to just listen in something. Who knows? Maybe they're playing in that campaign currently, and it's like, oh man, I didn't know that.
I'll try not to spoil anything because, okay, yeah, I'll try not to spoil anything.
Yeah.
but yeah. So when you guys got to the city, I think the issue I was having was, all right, the only way I can get the stuff moving is for you guys to have conversations with these people that know these things. And this was my issue with modules sometimes, is that they rely on certain conversations happening in order for those quest hooks to even start. So if I bring you to a place that I know a conversation needs to happen, I have to make that conversation happen. So it's and I'm learning, which is why I like Curse of Strahd better, because it's all about conversation and not as much about running through dungeons and going on a bunch of quests. So those conversations can take longer, so there's more time to insert things in. Like your conversation in Crest the other day was just it was fun for me because I didn't have to rush anything. I didn't have to push any plot points in. If you learned about it, you learned about it. If not, then that's your fault, not mine. So it was kind of nice. But in Tomb of Annihilation, it's a different story for sure.
Yeah. I guess since we're on the topic of modules, so what's your approach to running modules? I guess Takrin, if you ran any modules, you can chime in as well. But I guess I'm mostly directing this towards Professor Heretic.
We haven't talked
sub
DMing style, but I'd say
you're just gonna be a censor, bud.
sub.
Sorry.
I'm here for it. I'll keep you guys on check.
Yeah.
On topic.
We'll just put bleeps in every time
Because we keep saying your name.
Yeah. No, let me rephrase that. We haven't talked about sub style, so I'll just briefly say that sub's very big on world building. I think that's what makes subs campaign so much different, is like it's just so well developed world building wise. And so that's something that we can definitely learn about this session from her as opposed to us, because I don't think either one of us is really phenomenal at that yet. But,
not at all. But yeah, Sub hasn't even talked yet. So yeah, Sub, talk about your DM style.
Oh, I thought I could get away with slipping into the background.
No, you're here. Come on, yeah. So, how would you? So, Heretics said it really well, that you're really good at world building. You're really good at fleshing out like the politics of your world and all that stuff. It's definitely way more detailed than what anything me or Heretic do when we prep for sessions or worlds.
It's a lot of work for sure, and you guys going off about, man, I'm so glad that I don't prep myself beforehand or expend hours doing this specific thing for this occasion. I'm just sitting here like, oop.
Well, look, Ash is basically 3 locations with a lot of stuff to do in them. But Glory Days is like this entire continent with all these politics and lords and whatever. It's way more detailed, so it requires a lot more, and that's why you spend hours doing it, and I spend I don't know, a couple hours. I guess you spend days. I just spend a couple hours typically prepping the session. And
honestly, even from outside of our own campaign points, I think what differentiates us is basically how we handle the tones of our campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
definitely the tone is wildly different. I like to put it on a scale, almost like a linear scale, with, let's say, Michael's being the far left and I'm being the far right. Heretic, you're like right there, like smack dab in the middle. Now I'll explain
Oh,
why,
yeah.
because
I like being the cream of the sandwich.
it's a literal ice cream sandwich because it's too dark. Okay, we're not gonna mention that. Cut that out.
Nah, we leaving it in there. He's just a literal
On
ice cream
that
sandwich.
creamy white vanilla. Melts in your mouth.
Oh my goodness. You're right though. What was my point? Okay.
You were saying that
The scale.
the scale. So I'm
The
I'm the far left side.
Far left, I'm the far right, and Heretic is in the far middle because in terms of tone, at least in terms of tones and how we handle stuff. So with Ass and generally that sort of campaign, I think Michael is really good at creating these very interactive, very engrossing comedic plots.
And iconic.
Definitely iconic. All of them iconic. The whole campaign is just amazing.
It's just filled with iconic, yes.
Well, thank you.
Even though there isn't a lot of world building, or there isn't a lot of spots to be world built or to be built in the world, there's still a lot of content. There's still a lot of flourishing features because most of the story lies within the NPCs and the situations that the party finds themselves in. And I personally think that a lot of the reason why comedic campaigns work so well is because it keeps the party invested. That isn't to say that you need to have a haha hee hee funny moment every time if that's not what your party wants, but it's definitely good to have a high energy group going through high energy situations.
I do want to take away from that for a moment because I realized something. I think world building might be the wrong term because I feel like Black Chinchillas.
You can say Michael.
Oh, that's right. Censoring myself. I feel like Michael's campaign does have a good bit of world building. I think the difference is you spend a lot of time on the lore.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time. Yeah. I think that's why I put you in the middle, Heretic, because it's just this kind of thing where you will have information and you'll have lore and stuff about the towns and the cities, and you'll have these complex plots going on in the background with very high branching storylines, but there will also be like a couple of dick jokes when it in there.
Yeah. Just a couple.
Just a couple, just a handful.
A handful of dicks, you know.
Meanwhile, I'm your classic nerd D&D, very fantasy, very serious with the plots.
You're the gaping maw. I'm just playing. Go ahead.
I'm the gaping maw of D&D. But there's wildly different intentions and also wildly different play styles from us three as DMs in particular.
So now that we got that out of the way, and now the circle jerk is finished, modules.
Modules, yes. The way I run modules, and this is no diss on anybody who does like modules, I kind of feel like I have to go through and change some stuff most of the time.
All of it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and it's just some of those are really good, but some of them are just not that great. And a lot of the time it'll be very taxing on the players, especially for somebody who hasn't ran modules before.
Yeah, I have a hard time running modules in general just because like the ones I read that aren't like just straight dungeons, there's like Heretic was saying about certain modules having like very specific things that need to happen before you can actually progress the plot. Like I feel like some of those windows are so linear that you just have to change everything. Like the module I ran for Ash, where I just kind of gave up halfway through the recording. It was like, I'm just gonna do it my way. It's because I knew what the story was, but it was like, go talk to this person, go talk to this person, then go talk to this person, then go back to this person. I'm like, that's not fun. That's not fun.
Yeah, and that was the issue with Tomb of Annihilation, right? Was obviously it was kind of linear, and the draggy hex crawl through the forest. I did a lot of prep to try to make that not boring, but once we got to the dungeon, it was like, okay, this is a dungeon. This is pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of room for improvising stuff. After a session of the dungeon, I was like, no, I can't do this. I can't. It's just not going to happen. Let me change this whole dungeon. But the problem with that is you have to change the whole dungeon, and that's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
But I did, and I rushed along the parts that I thought weren't necessary. Like, there was no real grab. I think the problem with modules, especially long form modules or adventures, I guess you should say, the problem with the big books are there's so much there. It's hard to know everything, and if you don't know everything, it's hard to modify anything.
And honestly, most of the time, even though it's just so much there, it's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or sometimes, like, you run into a small situation where it's like, oh, there's this I'm trying to figure out how to do this without giving away anything. So when you go in Crest, there's situations where you can do a singular quest, and that quest is the stupidest quest ever, and it's short, and it's just one of those cookie cutter quests that's like, why are we even doing this? Oh yeah, because somebody asked us to do it. Wow, so fun, great.
Yeah.
So you just hit the delete button and be like, okay, I'm rewriting this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. And also, okay, I'm gonna be the spoiler sport. I'm kind of working on making an Ack Inc. game for some group. I haven't decided who I'm gonna recruit as players yet, but essentially what I want to do is run them through the Lost Mines of Phandelver first. And reading through the book, there are a lot of situations where it's just, and that's one thing I noticed with a lot of the modules, especially with a lot of the early ones, that there's just a lot of like unnecessary content. Like, for instance, spoilers, in the Lost Mines of Phandelver, the party runs into a young green dragon named Venom Fang. He doesn't do anything. The module gives you like one sentence of his motivations, and it's barely even a motivation. He just kind of came here after he was chased off of his previous territory. And the party is supposed to fight him at like level 2 to 3.
An adult dragon?
It's a young adult dragon.
And they're supposed to lose, right?
No, the dragon's supposed to fly off after the party starts waving a sword at it, but it just doesn't make sense, especially since it contradicts the lore of D&D.
Yeah. I think I ran the beginning of that once to bring in my own campaign, and I did a thing where it was like, oh, there's dragon. Oh, dragon's gone. You all passed out. Like, it made more sense to like have everybody die from the attack, like go unconscious from the attack and not die, but just go unconscious. Show the power of the dragon, then have them wake up in like a prison somewhere. That was like a really short 3-session game that I ran. It was actually one of the first ones before I ran anything for you guys.
Oh wow, really?
Yep, I ran it for some kids.
Oh, that's cool. That's just cute.
6 hours worth of D&D altogether, and that was it.
Fun.
I think the issue with that is it's really good to open up to your own stories, but it also sucks for people who are trying to stick strictly to the module.
Yeah.
Because if the dragon serves no substance to the plot, why is it there? And there will be a lot of times where I read modules and they'll just have like this one stupidly overpowered thing, or they'll just have this one nonsensical situation that the party doesn't even need to engage in the first place, but it's just there because.
Yeah. That was an issue I had because the first time I ran a game on my own, I had no idea what I was doing. I just grabbed the module, and then the party gravitated towards something that the module didn't explain. So I had to drop everything I'd read from the module and just start improvising.
And another problem with that too is if you have a DM who strictly learned how to DM through modules, it kind of cultivates railroad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't read all the modules. I mean, I haven't read all the big modules from D&D 5e yet, but from what I hear, most of them are pretty railroady.
Oh, absolutely.
There's
And that's why Michael was saying it's so linear. Like the situations are just so linear. So
Very
like what if
specific.
it's very, very specific. So what happens when a DM who wants to try building their own world, who wants to try building their own thing, doesn't know how to handle out of the box situations and doesn't know how to handle the party going off on their own away from what they originally intended?
What I've learned, I don't know if you do this, but to keep things open without having to kill yourself, because that was always my worry about keeping things open, was that I wouldn't be prepared for the next thing to come if you decided to go someplace I didn't plan on. One thing I've learned is that travel is a great buffer. So if you can separate cities, let's say you haven't prepared the next city or one of the cities they want to go to, you can use travel as that buffer in the session mid-travel, and then give yourself some more time to prepare and just toss in as many encounters as you can during that travel, just to kind of buy time and then come up with whatever crazy plot hooks you can come up with in the process. And most of the time, players will come up with them for you. Like the whole time we were in doing the Tomb of Annihilation, you guys were going through the forest. I had some random things that popped up, but sometimes it was more fun to just sit back and listen to you guys bicker, because that whole segment with Mondor and God, what was your character's name?
Lavender.
Thank you. I know it started with an L. I just couldn't remember. Mondor and Lavender over the Sun Sword it was great. So just letting that breathe a little bit, but that's why I really like Curse of Strahd, because it's not linear. It's just open sandbox. But I think after finishing Tomb of Annihilation, I could look back at it now and know how to come at it so that it's not linear. I think having your players create characters, or giving them their characters some sort of motivation that works best for that module, is probably the most important thing you can do. Because Tomb of Annihilation would have been way better if you guys were treasure hunters that wanted to get your greedy fingers on every piece of treasure in that tomb.
Me and Michael were talking about this earlier, actually, making sure that the plot involves the characters in some way, or at least something that the character cares about. Because if the main story, or at least if the main quest is over, then what is keeping the players there? What's keeping them invested?
Yeah. I guess maybe we can switch tunes over to that. Like, so how do you handle? Okay, I guess just to summarize what we were saying about the modules. None of us are super fans of it, but because they're a bit linear. But if you're going to run a module, it sounds like maybe the best way to do it is to integrate your
play. Change everything. Use it as a source of ideas, and that's it. Like when we ran Tomb of Annihilation, it was nothing like the book would have said. So I think that's the best way to go. Just change everything.
Yeah, and if you're gonna run it as like your base, maybe make sure your characters are part of that world. Yeah, integrate into that world in some type of way. It's different from running like a homebrew game where it's just like, give me whatever you want and I'll make it work. I think for modules it's more like, this is the world, this is what we're doing, do something that fits.
Yeah, exactly. Look at it and say, what is the main drive? What is this module's main drive feeling like it wants to be? Like Tomb of Annihilation feels like it's a grave robbing sort of thing. So make sure everybody is interested in stealing a bunch of stuff from the tomb.
Yeah, and not only that, make sure check in with you yourself as the DM. What tone do you want from the campaign? And try and come up with ideas to add on to the module that fit that tone.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice.
Yeah, so if you're running something like what's a horror module? If you're running if you're running Curse of Strahd essentially, and you want to put emphasis on the horror, then make sure to see what the module gives you for spooky events, or try to add your own, and maybe it'll be a town that's a little bleak, but if you want to have that sort of aspect, make it bleaker, have there be a problem within the town, or, just add your own spin on it. It'll create your own.
Speaking of that, your own spin, I think the important things to take away from modules right away before you even start thinking is know the main characters, the main NPCs, read them, know them well, and then know the basic plot and know the ending. Then you could do whatever else in between once you know those three things.
Oh, absolutely. That is 100% good advice, because it's just kind of the factor. And I'm sorry, I'm coming at this from like a art perspective. You can kind of
whatever connects dots for you, just go for it.
Yeah, whatever connects dots. Think of it as or at least think of it as like being a writer or anything like that. You need to know what the rules are first before you break them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can't
know your destination before you start to adjust the track.
Yeah. Even though we're not a fan of modules, I do think if you're going to create a story out of a module that you've picked up, make sure to do your research in the sense of read the module, make sure you go over and understand what the module is trying to do, and see if it lines up with your plans. And that way, when you understand the character motivations, or if you understand where the plot is supposed to go or where it wants to go, you'll have an easier time integrating your own ideas.
Yeah, and don't feel like you have to read the whole freaking book. Like, read the part you're on now. Read the important characters and the ending and any big events, but don't go through and try to read every room in each dungeon, because that's a lot of information you don't need to know until it's time.
Yeah, just like I said, a lot of the modules is just a whole bunch of nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's good to know the story and the people and stuff. But yeah, like, it's information overload. You don't have to memorize every dungeon. You can learn what the dungeon's about, what's in it, but like, don't feel the need to memorize every single dungeon or whatever. It's
don't even stress about reading every dungeon. Just know the dungeon exists and why it exists, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I guess to just sort of, since we're on the topic of characters and running games, I guess we can attack this from both angles. But I feel like we'll say more about homebrew. What is your approach or advice on integrating your characters into sessions and into your story? And what are some things that you do for, I guess, either tone, pacing, or keeping your characters engaged?
Session 0 to start with.
Well, even before session 0, just make sure that when your players sign up, they know what they're signing up for.
Yeah,
that too. And I think a lot of people look at session 0 as like, let's build a character and talk about it, and that's good. But I mean, individual session 0s like we've been doing, like we did for Curse of Strahd, where you like. I think that was the biggest change that I made that I wish I could have done or did do on Paradise, was integrating characters in the world by giving them some space to live in before they meet the rest of the party. And I've seen other DMs do that, and I always thought it was a great idea, because then you come in on session 1 with something to talk about.
Yeah, that was actually a really good idea for Curse of Strahd. It definitely gave us all like a little, like, we kind of lived our backstory a little bit before we met the rest of the party, and that gave us a little bit more of a relationship, even though like I still feel like in Curse of Strahd right now we're strangers, but we're still kind of close. I mean, obviously I'm playing Vieric as a grumpy old man, so yeah, I kind of have to keep myself kind of a stranger.
You're only 2 days in, so
yeah,
strangers still.
But yeah, I feel like we have a relationship, like me and Sethmir's character are, Vieric and Sethmir. That whole relationship was born from the one shot, just because, from the session 0, just because we had something, like, you put our backstories together, and it was like, okay, what's our relationship? This old man and this young guy are now working alone together. How will this old man react to this? Oh, he'll just boss this other person around. I'm the boss now.
Well, of course, with player permission.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, don't be just like a jerk. Obviously, I made sure that while we were doing it, I made sure that Sethmir was cool with it. Like, the player was cool with it, but that was just kind of our dynamic.
Allow me to steer the conversation a little bit. One thing I could definitely recommend, if you would like to have a smoother story or a smoother connection between party members and DM, definitely maybe before session 1 or before session 0, or even when you just meet them, make sure to get to know your players a little bit, especially if they're strangers, or if you get your group off of something like r/LFG on Reddit or on Roll20 or anything. Just take some extra time to get to know your players because they're strangers. I know a lot of times when you're a stranger to somebody, you don't really know, how they're gonna think, how they're gonna feel about certain character aspects you have, or it's always that sort of mystique of, okay, well, I don't really know these people. I think definitely getting to know your party members and getting to know your players and your DM would be easier, an easier opening up to character collaboration.
I disagree. On day one, I think you should imprison them, let them escape, and fall in a bunch of shit.
Works every time.
That is a very specific reference to our first campaign. for everyone who didn't listen to Evolution, which is probably the entire audience here.
Entire world, yes.
But, yeah. Maybe you have that sort of group that you will click the moment you fall into a vat of literal doo-doo water.
Yeah, but I guess just to kind of piggyback off of what Sub was saying about that, about getting to know your group, I think especially if you're playing with a bunch of strangers, sometimes people enter into games with hang-ups based off of like past games. Some people had DMs that were real jerks. Sometimes they're nervous about a character concept or throwing out new ideas, or maybe they're just a new player and they're really shy. I think just getting the chance to just like talk to them and let them know that you encourage their ideas, or telling them what you expect from like what the rules of your world is, or just being like, hey, what you want to do. What type of D&D do you want to play? Go ahead.
A good time to do that would probably be when you sit down with them to help them develop a backstory, because I feel like that's something that a lot of DMs don't do. They let you just show up with a backstory, but the DM doesn't involve themselves.
Oh yeah, and then it's like this stranger story that you're not used to, and you got to get used to it instead of just being there right from the get-go and having an idea of what the player wanted from it.
I think that was an issue I definitely had, where I think I even did it for Ass. I didn't really super flesh out everybody's backstory. I think we had like short conversations, but yeah, it was like very like, you guys showed up with the story, I said okay, and I made it work. But I think when we did it for Curse of Strahd, it was really good, where we just kind of talked about what the story should be and what we thought could work, and then we just had conversations and sort of adjusted it a bunch. I know I did that for Dablin's story, and a little bit of Red's story.
Yeah, absolutely.
I felt way better starting Curse of Strahd than I have in any other campaign just from doing that.
Oh yeah, and even this goes back to making sure that you have what you want set up that way when you go in, and it's highly encouraged that you go in and you talk to your players about what they want to play as a character, and you talk to them about what your expectations are for their characters and them as players. So when you sit down and you create that backstory together, not only are you invested in it from a DM standpoint, but you're also invested in it from the players also invested in it, I should say, because they've had a hand with essentially having that personal interlocking into the world that you've created, rather than just looking at the lore and going, okay, I know what I can do, this, and this. Instead of you just sitting down with them and going, okay, here's what you can do. And you tell me if that works for you.
You say looking at the lore as if either one of us have any lore for people to look at.
You know what I mean? Like the story setting, like the campaign setting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with that, I think when the conversation is had where you're talking to your players about building their backstory, it gives you an opportunity to create the NPCs that show up in the story, and then they get excited when they hear certain names. Like that's like a cheap way to get like ooh, I'm invested now. It's to be like, and then Johnny show up and they're like, oh, Johnny's from my backstory, and then all of a sudden they're more invested than they were before.
That's what I'll say about players. That's really important. Being a player is to know your backstory and know it well, because there's nothing more frustrating as a DM than to spend this time intermingling the main story with your backstory and then have it hit and you be like,
yeah, exactly. Or
oh god.
I'm about to
go ahead. I already know what's about to happen. fuck, dude.
It's extremely infuriating when you have a backstory and you do nothing with it when the DM gives you something for it.
And then complain constantly about how the DM gives me nothing to do. And then the DM goes, "Here's your entire backstory and plot on a silver platter. Do with it what you please." Well, my character doesn't
God,
get it, but
don't
I
even
get it.
bring me. Oh God, please! If any of you out there are, that's what my character would do. Please leave. You've been exempt.
Yes. Oh my God. All right,
So-
y'all want to talk about RP? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say sometimes you have to sacrifice what your player will do for what makes the story fun for everybody, including yourself.
And that's not necessarily to say that doing what your character would do is necessarily a bad thing, but doing what your character would do at the expense. Yeah, in the case of Rosie, but doing what you
Rosie was a good moment. Go ahead.
Rosie was a good moment, but in the case of doing what your character would do at the expense of the party,
Rosie.
especially. Well, no, Rosie was a benefit at the end. Rosie sucked in the moment, but he was a benefit.
Yeah, Rosie broke the DM's heart, but it blew up the campaign and turned it into what it is now. So,
so for instance, let's I don't want to be like my character's the best, but I want to use my Paladin Lavender, for instance, at least. I know I have certain guidelines for her, and I know that there are certain things that Lavender would do and Lavender wouldn't do, and I know all of us have that sort of character thing where it's like, okay, I have these boundaries for my characters, and I know if I don't know how to react to a situation, then it's like, what would my character wouldn't do in this situation?
Oh, nice.
And those are fine. Those are great. Sticking to your character and having a solid personality is great. Not only does it develop the depth to your character, but it also develops a solid plan for your DM who knows how your character will react to certain things, so that way they can gear situations towards your character.
Yeah, being consistent is super important.
I would say in developing your character to keep your constraints vague so that you have an idea. I think you talked about this before, Michael, just having an idea of kind of where you want to go with the character, but not so precise that you're like stuck in one box where you can't get out, and it doesn't feel personal to you because you wouldn't ever act like that. So if you leave it vague and just kind of let yourself flow through it, that way you can find the character as opposed to having established one. I think even actors do that with characters and scripts. They'll like have a brief idea of what the character is going to be like and then just kind of let it flow out of them instead of forcing themselves in a small box.
I think that's a really good idea. I think that's a really good point, because I know it's definitely hard to find that line, and it's not like you're going to find that line immediately when you start going into your character. There's always going to be those moments where you'll have a character and you know exactly, and you nail down their personality, but it gets to the point where you've nailed it down so well that now you're stuck in this box. I'd rather be stuck in a box and be cooperative with the party than be stuck in a box and be uncooperative. For instance, the popular trope of, let's say, rogues, for no particular reason. A lot of the times I see people, it's kind of like the meme. It's the meme to complain about the edgy rogue in the party. And a lot of the times the problem would be is that this character is so confined to its negative qualities, and it doesn't really have any positive ones or have any drive to help the party as a whole. And like, if you're going to play a character like this, why are you playing D&D?
Yeah.
Just write a story.
If you're going to play a character that's so uncooperative with the party, like, why are you even here? Like, why do you have a team? And why build this character that you think can outrun and like one-shot everything and then just put down the entire party the entire time? I'm not referring to anybody in particular. Don't even worry about it.
Speaking of anybody in particular, has anybody in particular in our group played a rogue that wasn't like that yet? Because I can't recall.
Yes, I have, actually. I've played a rogue named Chris Anthem, and she was in our group. No.
Okay.
Actually, yes, I have. Not Red.
That's been like one session for me. I haven't seen that much.
Yeah, but you'll see, it is way different from our edgelord.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
But
So I'm gonna
also
write a note
allow-
for myself. The next character I make is gonna be a rogue, just because I want to see what that feels like and how constraining it is. Because it
Actually,
seems
it's
like
not very constraining at all. Will you allow me to go on a bit of a tangent here?
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
I'm about to mark this down in the chapters. I'm about to explain what makes an edgy rogue good.
All right.
This type of character archetype, I should say, is such a double-edged sword because a lot of the times the people who want to play it aren't able to fully understand what it means to play it. Either that or they're just vindictive assholes. But you got to think about it from a writer's perspective. If you're going to be playing a character, a good way to make sure that your character isn't stuck in this negative box, even if they have a bad backstory, or if they're like my parents died when I was in the age of infancy. I was the only one nobody showed up to my own birth. I traveled the streets and I fought alley bears for a living to earn a nickel for food every day. Even if your backstory is something like that, there's still an easy way. If your character's closed off, there's still a person first and foremost, and a person is allowed to have feelings other than malicious intent.
Yeah, I think the problem is a lot of people don't realize that evil people generally are not perceived as evil because they act so normal.
They still have substance. They still have characters. They still have characterization to them. That not every person is a. I think Michael put it best. Not every villain is a mustache twirling psychopath. People still have. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, basically repeat what I said before. Not every villain is a mustache twirling psychopath, and not every good guy is a Captain America.
Exactly. You don't need to then take that to apply to your classes, to whatever classes or characters you play. As long as your character is three-dimensional and has stuff that they will care about and has stuff that makes them human, even if your character isn't human, but take it as like the term of having something to care about and having the willingness to be open to experience new things.
Yeah. I look at Tony Stark in the Avengers as sort of that personality where he's like anti the group, but also the leader, but also like he causes them problems. And there was moments in time where he was fighting against them, and he thought he was the hot shit, screw everybody else. But when push came to shove, he was still there. He still cared. Yeah. But then you could look at, like, let's say we added Deadpool to the Avengers, he would cause them issues as well, except he would still be there because he still has his motivations to complete. And you just have to make sure that you're creating characters that have motivations that align and not leaving that up to the DM to try to figure out.
Yeah.
I think so. It's back on the topic of playing an edgy character, and if you like playing an edgy character, that's fine. But there's a way to do it. There really is a way to do it. I think most people who play edgy characters, especially the classic edgy rogue, they typically create a character who don't have any flaws in their mind and who are perfect in every way and are super smart and cunning and super cool and amazing. And the problem with that is that you refuse to let your character be wrong, and you refuse to let your character grow up.
Exactly.
I think flaws are good flaws make interesting characters.
Like House. House is an iconic character from TV, and he wouldn't have been as iconic if he didn't have so many damn flaws.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my thought process with building Dagger was I want to give him something major to overcome, and that was having to carry around this sword that causes him he's got this huge sword that he can use, but he has disadvantage on every hit, so it's like, well, damn, he's tiny as well, and etc. There's a bunch of flaws that he has to grow out of. He's got a donkey as a mount that's slow as shit, so
Even in that case, having flaws not only gives you something to conquer and also gives you a storyline within itself, but it also makes your character relatable to the other party members. It makes them human. Again, I use that phrase. What makes a character a good character is a character that's willing to accept the fact that they're not perfect. A character who's willing to, a character who has problems, and a character who has flaws and quirks, and who are willing to overcome that. Playing a perfect character leaves you with no character development.
So how do you encourage that during the backstory writing process?
I definitely encourage, if you're going to play a character that's gone through so many stripes, analyze those situations that character has been through and give them flaws. It gives them flaws and quirks based off of the experiences that they've gone through. I've seen that works for me a lot.
Yeah, I think to simplify it a little bit more, like when I make my characters, like Heretic touched on it, like I don't flesh out everything about them, but I have an idea of what I'm going for. So I usually give them something that they care about, and then I give them something that, if I'm going to give them like a vice, like Kipper, he's a drinking problem, and he's like he doesn't like to get close to people because that got him killed. Like I give them stuff that I give them vices and problems, and then I give them stuff that they care about, and then I cultivate that around the character, and then my RP style is I'll create this character, and then I will fill in the gap that the party needs for my personality. So like Kipper was just like this sort of de facto leader because that's just kind of the type of person he was. He was a criminal, so he was always careful about stuff. So he just ended up becoming a leader. With the Goop, it was more of like Goop I was going to play like this sort of feral child, but then Goop just kind of became this person who was smart but naive. I guess clever, but she's super naive about a lot of things. And her tie to the party was that most people that she met was afraid of her, but the party wasn't. They actually encouraged her. So now she saw them as family, and she just wanted to protect her family. So all of her personal interests always ran through that. So every time I made a decision as Goop, I always thought, how would the party react to this? And then I would make that decision again as Goop. Like, it goes to like layers or whatever, but that's just kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, I found myself in a similar situation with Dagger where I have extrinsic motivations that would possibly lead me in a different direction than the group, and I have to force myself to say, okay, how can I tie my character in? Let me find relationships with each person in this group that will make him, like, I have to put my character in a situation that I know will make him want to be attached to the other characters, and I have to kind of force that. And I don't know if that's a skill everybody has or can have, but
or at least some compromise is probably a good way to put it. Compromisation that isn't really technically at the expense of the character.
Mm-hmm.
Again, using the edgy rogue example, if you grew up alone and you're used to being alone, then maybe a good way to countercept that is having this new group of people who do care about you, and it must make you feel some way about it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if that's something you haven't had growing up.
Yeah, like just off the top of my head, if I was going to play that character, he would be a loner when they first meet him, but the first time a character saves him or jumps in and takes a kill, jumps in and takes damage for him or distracts the enemy from him, I would have my edgy rogue talk to that character during downtime and be like, that was kind of cool that you saved me from back there. I mean, I could have beat him myself, but like, it was good to have you there. Like, I would have that little moment where my character's starting to come around, and then I would still be that loner later, but I was still, but my tie to the fact that, okay, this person has my back. If I ever fall short, I will keep that in the forefront of the character, and I can still be the edgy character, but I'm not the loner, and I'm not trying to be like the thief or the super edgy cool man. I'm just some dude that just happened to be around some people that he knows has his back, and then that'd be the character.
Yeah, and exactly. Another thing I want to add on to that too is making sure that you as a player are willing to allow your character to let their guard down. Because even if the campaign is short, even if the campaign is years long, if you're still stuck in that rut of I'm a loner and I don't talk to anybody and I don't interact with anyone, then not only are you secluding yourself from the story, you're also secluding yourself from the party. So if it ever comes down to the decision of either you or them, well. Yeah. Another thing as well, if you can't think of anything that'll tie you to the party, a good way to handle that is to ask your DM. Ask your DM to put in a situation, or ask your DM to essentially release ideas or something that'll...
That was going to be my well, that was kind of what I was getting at with the question earlier. Like, as a DM, how do you convince or how do you help players make that attachment at the start, and then again later if there is issues? But I think the big focus is at the start. Like, from the jump, you see somebody's backstory and you immediately say, oh god, this is going to go bad, and then you contact them, and what do you do at that point?
Well, at that point, it's just person communication. If you feel like the backstory isn't going to work, especially with the other party members or with the story as a whole, then it's just communication at that point. Tell them that they might need to change some things, and if you sat down and helped them write their backstory, as we were suggesting earlier, perhaps there's some things you can change, or some things you guys will be willing to make a compromise for. And if your rogue character, or if any character at that point, any paladin, any ranger, rogue, monk, wizard is having a hard time relating to the party, then don't be afraid to put in situations or scenarios and sessions that'll give the party a chance to improve their relationships with each other.
Yeah. I guess just to add a little bit to that, like, as a player, so as a DM, I'm sure most people have heard about the My Precious setting syndrome, where like a DM will create this homebrew world, and then like if anything happens that it goes against what they had planned for this very specific moment, then they'll railroad or reprimand their party for it. Like, don't let that happen when you're a DM. But like, I bring that up just because like I think players kind of have that, like, sometimes players can have that My Precious character syndrome, where they don't want to do anything that would like, they have this idea for this character and then not willing to adapt to what actually works for the group dynamic. Like, just don't be afraid to kind of, like, if you wrote this original story but it doesn't quite work for the feel of the party, it's okay to just take sidestep it a little bit. Like, I played Talos, and Talos was different in two different. Like, Talos is different in both the campaigns because the group was different.
My fix for that has always been just look for good moments. Yeah. Just find good moments. Even if, like, screw the character development as much as just like, oh, this is a really good moment for this cool thing that could happen here. Let me see if I can make that happen.
Yeah,
actually, that's a good point. Yeah, you do that a lot, and that it does create really good character moments, and I think it does like help pull the party together or create drama for the party in a fun way.
Yeah. Take some pressure off the DM, who's been trying to come up with some crazy twist, and you did it for me, thanks. I go to sleep now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also a thing. Make sure to talk to your DM, and if you have the possibility to, don't be afraid to just do something wild. I would say, Heretic, you gave me this idea that I want to put into practice. Is essentially, make sure to aim, even if you can't do it every session, make sure to aim for every session to create a memorable moment for your character.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen all the time. I had a really good spurt of interesting moments and episodes, but there's been multiple episodes now where I haven't had great, amazing moments, but damn it, when you see them, take them.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't have to be like a big story-changing thing. It could just be something interesting that your character does, or something.
Yeah, like selling out the werewolf, or
yeah, that was so good.
or casting darkness so you can get used to some spells and having the birdie fly through the boat and destroy the boat. I mean, whatever happens.
Even if it's like coming up with creative ways of helping out the party, like
turning into a shark.
Turning into a shark.
That was an interesting way to help the party.
on dry land.
On dry land, and then rolling down the alleyway and crushing everybody.
Yeah, and that would just be a thing. These are usually just spur of the moment things, and you know when to. It's kind of like an instinct. You'll know when to do it when it feels appropriate. But if you're a druid or a wildly unfortunate wild sorcerer, don't be afraid to do something. Don't be afraid to do something out of the box. Though out of the box decisions also keeps the DM on their toes, and it also can be enjoyable for the party. It turns the mood on its head. Example is turning into a shark in the middle of a street and rolling down the alleyway.
Or like when Old Man Vieric just starts yelling at people and telling them exactly how it is when everybody else is like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
It puts me on my toes because I'm like, I didn't expect that. Now I got to react. Shit.
Yeah. Or even I'm going to pull out an old record. Mike, you remember when you ran that one campaign, or at least that one module where with the angel?
Yes.
Us talking our way out of combat. Well, mostly it was Shane who did that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys talked your way out of combat, that you convinced this guy that like you guys were there to help his goal come true, and then he started telling you about how he loved his god. That was just a good moment. The whole you guys pissing off the dragons was real good in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a interesting character moment that kept the D on his toes. If 3 gold dragons tell you that you need to cross the river in order to survive, then clearly you can easily cross the river if there's no river to cross.
Yeah, speaking of that, I like that concept, and I've been trying to push it as much as possible. 2 things is, one, trying to make your combats more of a puzzle and less of a fight, and 2, allowing your combat the opportunity to be de-escalated through RP or prevented by RP. I think a lot of the times I forget that, even though I know it to be the way it should be. But I think a lot of people don't even try.
Yeah, it's just, okay, we're fighting, we roll initiative, now we're fighting, and it doesn't have to be like that.
Or I've been in a couple of games where you try to de-escalate and the DM again comes in with the railroading, and they go, well, no, you can't do that, you're ruining my encounter.
Right.
Yeah, that's crappy. If you're running a game and that's how you handle that, just, you're doing it wrong.
And I get it from a DM. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, a good way to deal with that that I've heard recently was before the encounter happens, if like they're walking through a dungeon, you always describe everything in the room before you even mention that there's monsters there, to allow people to give a chance to come up with a plan before they have to roll initiative.
Yeah. Well, I guess since we're on the topic of combat, let's talk about combat. How do you guys make combat interesting, fun, engaging, or dangerous? Or all of the above? Timers.
Yeah, puzzles, timers. How do I explain timers?
Environmental dangers.
Yes.
Maybe might have certain things they'll do for a round, or they'll have certain things or certain quirks to them that keep the party on their toes.
That's exactly what that's exactly kind of what I meant. So timers that cause developments to happen. So like so that it's not just this boring combat, and you can't do it all the time, but especially with the big ones, having certain developments that could happen at the top of each round or after so many rounds or whatever. Just having those and being ready to pull them out to kind of spice things up, so it's not. And also some secondary objective too, like those seem to help. Like two of Annihilation, you had plenty of things that you had to think about in the process of killing Charity. No spoilers here because nobody else is going to run through that.
Yeah, but also to add on to your point of that player objective, there's also enemy objective, and you like to break it. You break it. At least I break it down to 3 simple objectives. Enemies would fight either for a purpose, to defend, or for food.
Mm-hmm.
So of course this equates to different types of monsters, but if an enemy is trying to accomplish a specific task or a specific purpose, make sure that if the players do something that would relate to that certain task or topic or interest, then to react accordingly. It keeps the combat interesting because the enemies aren't just punching bags or just meat bags essentially, or at least thoughtless meat bags, unless they are.
Write down conditions if they're not beast or some crazy animal that just attacks for whatever. Write down conditions for surrender or conditions to flee.
Absolutely.
So giving combat a reason definitely helps out a lot. And like a lot of my interesting, like I think the reason why some of my combats are pretty interesting is because in addition to them having a reason, I like to make everything action reaction. So like if you punch a bad guy, something happens. He'll say something. He'll move some type of way. He'll like something happens. So just because I've been in games where it just kind of feels like you roll a 20 and you hit the guy. All right, what's your next move? And that's nothing. If it's a long combat, you can't just do like 40 rounds of just all right, and you hit. What's next? And you hit.
Yeah.
Like descriptions are really good for keeping combat interesting, and it doesn't have to be anything huge. Like I think a lot of people feel like whenever I give the advice of give descriptions to stuff, I think a lot of people think like they have to make it big and extravagant every single time. You stab the guy in his rib, and he falls down to the knees and screams out for his mother, and he stands back up, looking at you with rage in his eyes. Like you don't have to do that every time. Sometimes it's just you hit the guy, his knee buckles a little bit, and he stands back up, getting ready to hit you next. And another thing I do is every time somebody else hops in, especially if it's a long initiative order, the moment another player plays, the moment another player's turn show up, describe it real quick. Describe what just happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Real quick.
It's really hard to do when you have a lot of people, but at least making a note to do that as often as you possibly can. Yeah, for sure.
Because it's easy to get lost in like the combat. Like sometimes people take a while. Like they go through their action, the reaction, the bonus action, then the movement, and then it's just like all this stuff happens, and then it's somebody else's turn. So usually the first question, especially if you're doing a theater of the mind, is okay, what just happened? Where is everybody? So just be like, this guy's 10 feet away. This guy's here. You watch this person do this. What would you like to do?
Plus, the wrap up kind of makes things feel like they're happening all at once too, because when it happens in game, it's like really slow because it's like 2 minutes between people's turns, and then when you do the wrap up and then kind of consolidate everything that's happened in a sentence or two, you can imagine it happening as fast as it's really happening.
Definitely, because in reality, a round of combat is 6 seconds. I think portraying that there is this sense of urgency and this sense of speed that's going on in between attacks, or describing that if you're fighting a whole bunch of wolves, maybe before your turn, you see that you just watched your wizard cast a firebolt, and that wolf who was heading towards you suddenly stops once he gets within 5 feet and turns to look at the wizard.
And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And also to add on that, if you're also doing developments, that breaks things up even more. And at some point, you don't even have to write developments down. Like when we were doing the Curse of Strahd thing and you guys were attacking the kid, and he like turned and ate his mother and stuff. And all these things were things that I just realized would have happened anyways. I never wrote those down. So I just decided, all right, I need developments. I need stuff to happen. This is going to be a long fight. So what can I have happen? Well, his mom would probably show up. And you just get really good at improving stuff like that after a while if you've been writing developments for a while.
Introducing new aspects into combat is the point we were making previously. Even if it's just like a thing that doesn't directly affect combat. Maybe if it's just like something happens to the battlefield or something, somebody does something.
And also, if you're going to put combat into an environment, make the environment completely interactable. If they're fighting in a tavern, let tables break. If there's bottles on the counter, let them pick it up and hit people with it. Like just that adds a certain layer to it. When you show up into a room and there's like stuff.
I don't mean to pull the curtain back too much, but here's another interesting thing. When you're doing theater of the mind, it's really great. There's this thing called anchors that you use to kind of create position. Like let's say there was a bridge in the middle there's like a river with a bridge going over it, and that's basically it, right? So you could think of that bridge as an anchor, and everybody's location in response to that bridge.
Yeah.
But because you haven't spent, well, number one, spending a lengthy amount of time describing everything around you makes people zone out. So if you just get straight to the point and say, all right, here's the big things. There's a bridge, there's a river. And then somebody says, hey, is there a tree around? You just say, yeah, there's a tree there. They're like, cool, I'm going to pull that down and drop it and make another bridge, right? That wouldn't have happened if I gave out a map and there wasn't a tree there. But theater of the mind allows you to just yes and to whatever. And I do that a lot where you'll ask, like when we were doing the session 0 and you were playing H3ritic and you were running with the carriage and you were like, hey, is there a tree I could pull down? I was just like, sure, why not? You know, like, just pull it down. It'll be great. It'll be cool. It'll be a cool, interesting moment. And I think the only exception to that is when the asks are too big. But when it's simple things like, is there a rock around? Like, there's nothing worse than to tell the player, no, you're in the forest, but there is no rocks around. Like, yeah. just agree. There's a rock there. Just take it, do what you want to do, because it'll be an interesting scene. But to the other point with the development that I was going to make was that it gave an opportunity for Sethmir in that situation to instead of just throwing daggers all the time, which is all that Sethmir can really do at this point in the level progression. It gave Sethmir an opportunity to do something else, which was the run and grapple, and that made it a little more interesting because then we had that whole rolling scene. Yeah. But continue.
Definitely allow me to add, if a player comes up with a creative way to change the tides of combat, don't reprimand them for it. In fact, I think you should probably encourage them, because in the end, creativity, allowing players creativity keeps them engaged. An example of this is I DM'd in a campaign where the party was hired to find out what was going on in this guy's basement because it was an inn and the guests were complaining about the food being gross or the water being acidic. So turns out there was a giant ooze that was hiding in the drain pipes, and there's a big drainage sort of, you know, like the drainage corks, or like the little grades. Because they were in the the drain grades. The ooze came out of that. But because they were in the cellar, that also meant a lot of ale barrels were there. One of my players had taken their action to break an entire shelf full of gallons upon gallons of ale. So with the intent of washing the ooze back down. So that was a thing that they did.
Yeah, or pulling the balconies down like you guys did in the winery, or trying to punch a hole in the thing to flood the place. Like, that would have been a cool scene too if that could have happened. Those are all interesting things that you should allow people to do, definitely. So my next question for you guys is, how the hell do you prepare your combats? And what does your sheets look like?
Oh boy.
My combats are very, just like how I plan a lot of my sessions around moments. My combats are planned around moments as well.
Yeah, same.
Like for the most recent episode with the combat on the bridge. I saw this opportunity to have this rickety bridge that if you got hit, you could fall off and fall into the water and then just end up somewhere else, cold and probably a level of exhaustion. So if for whatever reason, like the whole party, like there was a possibility, not really a possibility because most of you guys can fly, but there was a bit of a possibility that all of you could have ended up in the water instead of drowning, lost your cart, lost your supplies, lost all your bags of holding and all that stuff, and would have had to start from square one once again. So I just kind of saw like this opportunity to threaten the stability of what you guys already established. And so the threat wasn't even that you were going to lose the fight, because I don't think any of you really thought you were going to lose the fight. I think the real threat would have been losing all your stuff.
Yeah. And I think two things to that. Number one, if you have a awesome location, don't miss the opportunity to cause chaos there. Number two, Don't be scared to kill your players because it's really hard to kill people in D&D 5e, and that's what I'm learning with Curse of Strahd.
Yes.
So
And also counterpoint.
push those
Counterpoint to that.
buttons.
Don't go out of your way to make it your end all be all to kill your players.
Oh yeah.
So
Just don't be a.
yes,
Go ahead.
some DMs, and I don't know, it always rubbed me the wrong way. Every time I get into a campaign and a DM would brag about the amount of players that they killed.
Yeah, that's not a lot of fun. That's not fun at all. It's still like hard to get invested in your character if you know the DM's trying to kill you. I think the real way to handle that, like the real way to take that advice would be plan something. If you think it's a little dangerous, just throw it in there. See what happens.
Like
Yeah.
I would say
Don't try to
Let
kill
'em
your
run.
players, but if it might kill them, there's a good chance they'll outsmart you. Like I had this really crazy storm giant encounter that I had planned. I intended for you guys to run away, but obviously Kai
Ian,
completely
Kai,
changed that.
Here's what I would say. This is my best advice as far as CR management goes. Is don't be scared to give them a hard encounter, but reserve the deadly encounters for bosses.
yeah.
That's really the best way I could put it, because and then when you throw them the hard encounter, there's two things. I think
Don't
there's
be a
two
dick
sides
about
of this
it.
coin. Some people will keep refreshing that HP. Some people will reduce the HP just to get it over with when it's dragging on. If it's dragging on, let them die. Like let the bad guy die and just move on with the world. If it's not a fun fight, it's not a fun fight. Just let it end as soon as possible. But if it's becoming a challenging fight, don't be scared to pull your punches, because I've done that too many times where I've talked myself out of killing somebody because I didn't want to kill somebody that day.
And this also isn't I don't want this to be a discouragement against DMs who like to challenge their players. If you feel like it is within your players' best interest to give them a challenge to knock them down a few pegs, I think you should do it without malicious intent, is what we're trying to get across. D&D is a game that everybody should have fun in. And if your fun is ripping away the hard work that your players had gone through with creating their characters and possibly getting attached, if that's your idea of fun, perhaps you should not be a DM.
Yeah.
Or at least
Find a different group. Find a hardcore group that wants a meat grinder.
Yeah, if that's your DM style, I think maybe you should just tell them, like, yeah, I'm gonna challenge you guys. You guys gonna have encounters that are probably gonna kill you. Are you okay with that? Or are you guys okay? Just kind of have that conversation. Like maybe don't take the danger of dying out, because that's gonna take a lot of the fun out of combat. Period. But just like let them know that there's a chance that they'll die because that's your fun. Like, and probably don't say it like that, but just you plan on challenging them. And there might be some time for that they'll die, and maybe just let them know what to expect. I think a lot of issues in D&D can be avoided if people just talk to each other.
And absolutely, except as a DM, you run the world. You essentially control everything that happens, minus the players. If the players hand you an L, just take it. It's okay. There's always next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Charity.
Yeah. I would say if you want to, if you're scared of figuring out that line, my advice would probably be make a deadly encounter. I mean, not deadly encounter, but make an encounter. If you're nervous about it being too deadly, give it an out. Like they can run away. Give it enough space they can run away, and then let them run. Well, probably not let them, but allow them to run away. Allow them the option of running away. And
or flying up 300 feet to fall drastically to their deaths twice.
Yeah, just something. Just if you're nervous about killing them or nervous about things being too dangerous, there's options. Like combats don't have to end when people die. Combats can end when they get away.
Yeah, and
so
plus, this also is a good way to link back into enemy goals, enemy tasks. Having those situations in your head, knowing when the enemy will surrender or if they'll not, or what's the boundaries for how they're going to stay in the fight.
Yeah.
I never write those down because I feel like I know those, but it's probably important for people to write those down if you haven't gotten in the practice of thinking about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know for a while I did, but now I don't. Now, I guess it's kind of hard to really talk about my process without talking about my overall process. But basically, on the surface, my combat encounters literally looks like monsters, 9 wolves, 450 XP. That's it. That's it. I know where they're going to come in, and I know what location they're going to come in at, and that's the gist of it. But that's for random encounters, right? Like if I have, if it's a boss encounter, it's a different story. I'll spend like especially final bosses or big bosses. I spend a lot of time thinking of how to make it interesting. How to throw in some sort of twist. Yeah, I'll spend a whole session worth of development on just that one fight. But for regular fights, I just kind of write down how many of what and make a link to it so I can quickly bring it up.
Yeah. I think most of my combats are able to be de-escalated in some way. So
yeah, I think
yeah, you guys de-escalated that wolf situation by having a turtle move faster than the wolves and completely threw that off. And I could have said, well, the turtle's slow, but I was like, nah, it'd be fine. It was a good idea. It'll probably work. I'm not going to do the math on it right now. It'll probably work. So yeah, they just skipped the whole wolves thing because that's given the reward for a great idea. You know, like even if it wasn't as fast as 2 horses would have been, I still felt like it was enough that you guys could have just blew past those 9 wolves. So you de-escalated it in that sense, and that was pretty cool. So yet again, it comes back to that yes and just going with it.
Yeah, encouraging your parties out of the box ideas is great, and encouraging them to interact with things or even like using spells in non-combat ways. It's like when they have cool ideas and you encourage it, they're more likely to be more engaged with when you describe the locations, because then they got stuff to bounce off of, and they're more likely to be think of like creative ways to do combat. And I know that sounds scary as a DM, because then they'll be like, can I is there water on the floor? Can I freeze the water and make it difficult terrain? Yeah, you can do it. The spell doesn't say it can do it, but it's water and there's ice, so why not? You know?
Can I make a whole river of lava just disappear real quick so that we don't fall into? Sure, go for it. Yeah, don't ruin my whole fight. Whatever. So, I guess since we're already talking about planning for combats, what about the rest of the planning? I feel like campaign planning, we'll get there, but individual session planning, what's your process like? Or what's your sheet layout? Do you have like a set way to do it, or do you just write a bunch of stuff down?
So for Ass, it's very character driven. So the only things I need to know for a session is character motivations, the scenarios that are potentially gonna happen, and then the rule, and basically the lore or the rules of the setting, and that's all I really need. A lot of my Ass notes are just like, this character's probably going to show up, this character's probably going to show up, this character's probably going to show up, and then I'll make little notes about what everybody else is doing that might not show up, and then I'll just run the session with that, and then I'll just write down our RP for stuff like when you guys had the drug heist, without getting given too much detail. I just knew what the house looked like, and I knew who would be there. And then after that, I just kind of went with what I thought would be entertaining at the time, and then that's how I ran a lot of stuff. Like I knew the mom was going to be drunk, and I knew that the girl was going to be at home alone. And that's all I really had planned. And then as we were going, I was like, okay, this would be funny if the dad showed up and this is what he was like. This would be interesting if this character gets spotted in the bushes. That would be funny. Like it was just a lot of like going with the party and the feel. And sometimes I plan stuff and I can tell you guys aren't into it, so I'll pivot to something else. So that's why like not super strict planning sometimes help, because if I just know the lore, then I can figure out how to do something that isn't planned and still make it interesting or engaging in some way.
Yeah, I'm very loose too. And speaking to knowing kind of what's in a location. Like when you're doing the Curse of Strahd, the module had when you're doing the whole baby delivery thing, right? The module had mentioned it, and that was a thing that you could do. And I read it, and I was like, they're not really going to want to do that. I'm not going to read this too in depth. There's not a whole lot here. But I knew what it was about. I did read it, but I didn't like spend too much time planning it, right? So whenever you chose to do that, I already knew what was there. I already knew what was supposed to happen, so I just improv'd off of that, and I just knew what the point of that encounter was supposed to be, and I knew that it wasn't something I wanted to spend a whole lot of time on. So just let it happen, make it a moment, move on, you know. Because I knew you guys wouldn't be as interested in the delivery as much as you would be the thing that comes afterwards, which was the mystery, right?
Right.
And I just lucked out that you guys didn't get to figure that out, so I can keep hanging it over your head.
Yeah.
I do have a system now that I use, and I've borrowed loosely from the Lazy Dungeon Master Guide, which is I have a section on every page now called Review the Characters, and I just put every player character in with a short description. Like for H3ritic, it says, I just put loves to tinker, old man with a complex, wants to save his son. And then I'll put a note on there under it with some information that I might need if something specific happens. And if I plan on having something of your story arc, I'll write one sentence about that thing that I want to happen there. And then a link to your sheet so that I can review the characters and make sure I know what each character is interested in before we start. That would be really hard to do with Paradise because there's so many, but with just 5, it's a lot simpler.
Yeah.
And then I'll write a loose outline. Like the last session we played, I just wrote, killed the stalker, walking back to the woods, ravens return, Stefania rushes them to hurry, wolves are coming. Then I put wolves versus slow carriage, which you guys skipped that part. And then at doors, Stefania calls for them to open. They do. Barrels to Dimitri's house, so that's where I'm railroading you guys to that location. And then dinner time, and then my notes about dinner time, and that was all I wrote for the session, as far as the loose outline. And then I'll mark out like important scenes that I feel like need to happen or would be interesting if they happened. And I'll just write a couple of words, like meeting Dimitri's family. Like that's a scene. And I knew I needed to think about that. I needed to be prepared for that scene to happen, which it did. And then I'll have monsters where I just list out what monsters we're going to fight, if there are any. And then I'll have the NPCs listed out. I also have a separate page for individual NPCs, so this will be the point where I'm like, all right, here's the NPCs that we're going to run into, and then I'll make a hyperlink to one of my OneNote pages that just tells me more about that character, in case you do run into them. I generally write about 10 secrets, which is where a lot of the twists come from, because I force myself, even if the module doesn't give it, I force myself to find at least 10 things that's interesting that could come up in conversation or in something you could uncover. Last session I had 12. Sometimes those carry over between sessions, so it's not like I'm always coming up with 10. It's just a place to start. And then fantastic locations. If there's a place that you're going to come to that I feel like needs to be described very well, I'll spend a second to think about how I'm going to describe that. I used to write scripts there. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
And then I'll just list all the music that I want to use.
I think I guess to add a little extra detail, if there's a very specific thing I want to introduce or go through, I typically write it as like a 3-act thing. So I would do like for the session where you exploring your home, when Dagger was exploring his hometown, that one was written as like a 3-act thing. I wanted to introduce introduce the setting, and then introduce a little bit of the story with a combat, and then do a conclusion. I would typically write that stuff, and then I would include like monsters if there's a fight, and I would include like NPCs that you'll meet, and just like little details that I could work with. but I think for the most part it is pretty loose.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I like about taking so little notes is that it's so loose that anything could happen. Like I wrote Dimitri at gates, and when the time came and you guys got to the gates, I was like, yeah, we'll just meet Dimitri at his house. And then I put morning run in the missing sheep, and then I was like, they're gonna go mess with some babies. I'm not gonna worry about the missing sheep. So
Yeah.
And you guys already had a plot hook for that. So there's a lot of times where that happens where my notes aren't anywhere close to what exactly happened, but at least I came in feeling like I was prepared, and I think that's the important part, is that like you feel like you're prepared, and from there you can just do anything. I think that's what stops a lot of people, is they feel like they're not prepared enough, and I used to be that way where I would hold off having a session because I felt like I wasn't prepared enough. But it turns out that you need very little preparation at all once you understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think the sessions where I feel like I'm not prepared, even if I did like the same level of prep, if I feel like I'm not prepared, I will perform less. I'll perform not as good as the DM.
Yeah,
so I think,
100%.
Yeah, so I think honestly it's just about feels, because I've learned from early on DMing that no matter how much you prep, something's going to happen that you're not ready for. So it's better to be able to improv and know the rules of the world instead of like trying to be like this perfect whatever. Like I'm pretty sure for people who are players, you've been in games where the DM just the most memorable moment is probably something that the DM didn't even think about.
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't think about that last fight you guys are going to be on at all. Like that wasn't even a thought. I didn't think that was going to happen that day. I didn't take any notes on it. I knew it was there. I knew it was a thing that could have happened, and it just happened. Another thing that I do write sometimes is I create a strong start where it starts with a fight or starts with some really interesting dialogue. I don't always do that because sometimes it feels forced. Like I don't always want to force you into a combat right away or some crazy scenario right away.
Yeah.
But there always is something actionable. I think that's the important thing. Like start with something actionable, because I've made that mistake a lot where we just open start, do whatever you want, and then it's like, what do we want to do now?
Yeah.
I think let's talk for an hour about what we want to do, and then maybe we'll do it.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I think I guess to add a little bit of extra for what I like, if I'm prepping for a session and there's a location, I usually give it something interesting. Like if I'm giving you a tavern, I would describe something that you can interact with in the tavern. Right. Or if I'm going to introduce a character, I will give them something interesting, something about them that's interesting.
That was another note I heard related to that, was to, like, if you're going into a location, describe the most interactable things, the most important things, the big things about it, and then leave the rest up to questions. Like, somebody wants to look around this place, let them do that, but make every location as fantastic as you possibly can. Like,
oh man,
I can't urge that enough. Just make everything as memorable as you possibly can.
One of my favorite things to do, and this is like the mantra I follow for every single thing, whether it be a tavern, a town, a person, is essentially the two to three variables of having one major interesting thing and either two minor interesting things or one minor interesting things. Even if it's just a small town or a small tavern that the party is just stopping by, and you could just make something that town or tavern has this quirk about them that'll at least keep the players interested, especially, and that's also good if they're interested in it, because then they'll start diving into it, which will be great for you as a DM if you need time to prepare something else.
Yeah, let's do it right now. Let's make a weird tavern. Let's make a fantastical tavern. Okay, so you show up to this tavern. All the seats are gold. Why?
Yeah, like why? Because
that's all. That's it. That's all you really need, right? I can already picture that in my head. The seats are gold and the floor is made of silver.
Yeah, everything.
And it's slippery and very clean, and the janitor is actually mopping it up right now. That's
but the janitor is also made of silver.
Holy shit. That's a plot hook right there.
He's a construct. You know why? Because the owner of the tavern is an artificer. He's a transmutation wizard or an artificer.
Yes, and the one of the problems that this tavern has all the time is that people are trying to steal bits of the seats and of the ground. So all the waiters and waitresses are fully trained assassins. So every time they catch somebody trying to steal, they like throw a dagger at them with like precision.
With precision, yes. And notice when we described that, we didn't go into like excruciating detail about what paintings are on the wall and like all this lore stuff, right? The lore stuff is good to have there, and I think that's the problem with modules, going back to that for a second, is that they heavily describe everything in the room as if they're the most important thing you need to know. But the players, and I know this from experience, the players will toss out all the non-important stuff and just only hear the big stuff. And sometimes if you explain too much, they won't hear the big stuff. So just explain the big stuff and then let them ask questions and tell them about the little stuff as they explore more.
Absolutely. The worst thing you could possibly do as a DM, especially if you want to have players that are interactive with the environment, is to not have an environment at all. It's to just be like, so you walk into a tavern, what do you do? Like, there's nothing there. It's just like, imagination wise, it's just a white space.
Yeah. It's the big open white room from the Matrix. That's what that is.
When you say you walk into a tavern, you're just there, I could just imagine this log tavern that you just walk in and there's just tables. Nobody's really there. There's just a bartender. He doesn't even come to the table to serve you food. He's just sitting there. Like, that's it. You just sit down.
Yeah, I think another thing to think about too is like when you're describing locations, is that when you describe something, everyone at the table is picturing something different. So if you're gonna, I usually have things in there that if we're doing a location, there's usually stuff in there that you can interact with. I just keep those things very obvious, because if you know, we walk into a tavern, everybody's picturing, one person might be picturing a luxury hotel lobby. One person might be picturing a classic bar. One person might be picturing a log cabin with people.
And people. I said no people.
No people at all. Just a big empty room.
Yes.
So like, you know, so like it helps to be like, you're in this room, there's people playing poker and they're inviting people to play. There's people over there playing darts. There's the town guard you met earlier over there on a date, still inside his uniform, talking, you know, he's there not paying attention to you, like in
sub
beep.
Sorry, beep. In subs campaign, when we went to that tavern in the very beginning, and we had the eating contest and smoked the place out. Like, I imagine that place probably much bigger than everybody else. It's just but it's visually in my head. I can remember it as if I thought about it yesterday.
Yeah,
it's just
and
there.
It wasn't really about the physical description of the tavern, even though I know I'm a little bit wordy with those. It was about the tone and the ambience. Like, do you remember the first thing you saw when approaching the tavern? The first thing about the tavern that you saw?
I don't.
I just remember the table.
Well, not even when you went inside. When you were approaching the tavern, there was a dude who ran out and like threw up in the middle in the alleyway.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't remember that. Yeah.
See, it's weird how people's memories work, because exactly what I remember of us sitting around the table, eating and doing all these challenges, other people doing challenges around us. I don't even know if that was true, but I think I felt like somebody else was doing a challenge. And this annoying waiter and
What do you mean?
this sort of long place where it was like it was just so far to get from our table to and it was probably because it took so long before we got to that part, but I just felt like it was a really long time between walking from the table to walking to the bar, that this place was just extremely long. Like rectangularly long. And so that's how I envisioned it in my head, was that it was crowded. It was, you know, but and you didn't have to really describe it that way. It was just that ambience that was there, the way it felt. It just kind of manifested itself there in my mind. But everybody, I'm sure, remembers that tavern differently.
Yeah, I remember it being crowded for sure. But I like in my head, I felt like I saw big picnic tables. I know that's not what subs described, but I imagine huge, like really long picnic tables, and I think it's because there was so many of us at the table. So,
Dude, I
that's
imagine
kind of what I
booths,
imagine.
like wooden tables with cushioned booths.
Yeah, I saw all the tables were long picnic tables, and we were like in the middle of the restaurant.
Oh, I envisioned like on the wall. See, like
So yeah, I pictured us in the middle, and we could see like the people walk into the kitchen. That's where I thought we were.
oh, okay, yeah. And so yet again, we all have different, and that's why it's important to find some sort of anchor when you're doing this kind of stuff, especially if there's a fight. You find some sort of anchor that you could say, this is the distance from this thing everybody is. So at least we know that we're on the same page distance wise from this one thing.
Yeah.
And once you have that, then everything else can kind of be whatever. You just have to have some sort of spatial awareness there.
Yeah. Spatial awareness helps out for for a lot of things in D&D.
That's crazy though, how different our thoughts were about that place.
And it's kind of funny since I actually had an idea of my head what the restaurant was like.
Oh yeah, definitely. But that's why, yet again, I try not to over describe things because most of it goes down the drain anyways. And if I've definitely did some lengthy descriptions, especially script written descriptions before. And I think that's, like I said, modules are the worst for it because they over describe things where they don't need to be described until somebody's interested in looking around. Like there's an instance of Tomb of Annihilation where I'm sure you could have just walked in and saw the Tomb Guardian on the dais and I didn't have to explain the workstations and stuff around until after the fact when you're like, hey, what's around? Anything we can use? Yeah, there's workstations around. Then you paint the picture more broadly, but because it was all clouded in this one read aloud text, I'm sure most of you missed the stuff that was on the tables because it was just hitting you all at once.
Yeah, that happened a lot. Like I think if I get lost in the description, I will find one thing, and then like in my head, the room just has that one thing.
And as a DM, it's great to just be able to control that one thing by only mentioning that one thing until you have time to describe more.
What about NPCs? What do you do to keep NPCs interesting? I know that's kind of my specialty, but I know you guys have methods.
It depends on how involved those NPCs are. If they're key figures in a faction, I will flesh them out more. I generally just write their name and their age, and then I'll write a character archetype. Like Davian Mardikoff, I just put Gandalf/Yoda mix, just because I wanted to remember to try to encapsulate some of the phrasing, but still have the voice of an old man that's wise, right? And then I'll just write a goal sometimes. If I'm really looking, I'll write down a goal. And then if there's any secrets, I'll write down what they know about those secrets or rumors or something. And it really depends. My process changes depending on the scenario, but having a picture helps.
Yeah.
And having a character archetype helps. And having a goal helps. And a goal could be as simple as just wants to deliver wine, like... You could do so much with that. And I think I did with Davian was just that he just wants to help the people and deliver the wine. Like screw even, he doesn't even want to make money from it. He just wants to deliver it. And that was enough to build a character and have conversations with the character. And then to be able to butt in with Adrian because he wants to take over as his, you know what I mean? He's trying to be the next in line from his dad after his dad dies, so he's going to be the more encroaching type and kind of butt in and say, "Step away, old senile man. I'm talking here. Let me deal with these people." And his older sister, being sort of the voice of reasoning behind a lot of the stuff. And I felt like just knowing those things helped me really have those conversations because I couldn't have done it without those notes.
Yeah. I think having picture references or like little phrases that remind you of how to think about the character definitely helps, because I definitely have a lot of those for the NPCs and AS, and like most of them aren't even written down. They're just like little things I think about whenever I do the character. Like for Cosmo, always it's a Scooby-Doo laugh, and then I think about his position or what it was, I guess.
Yeah.
in the company.
Yeah, and I think, like we were talking about before, the voice acting doesn't matter so much if you can nail the character. At least the way the character talks and carries themselves. I think that's more important than the voice acting. But if you could throw in a little flavor, it helps, or an accent here or there, kind of helps separate things. But
it's just I think the biggest strength of having voices for your characters or speech patterns or dialects for your characters is that if they have to talk to each other, it's easy for you to do it without having to say. And then John says, and then Mary says, you could just be like, hello, I'm just trying to find some money. Oh, really? You trying to find some money? Was this a robbery? Nah, I'm just trying to make my way. I'm just an old man. You can tell it's two different people talking.
yeah. And you could kind of picture them too. Sub, what's your character notes look like for NPCs?
Well, essentially, I just follow the pattern for the buildings I would have. Well, also, yeah, it just depends if this NPC is supposed to be a main part of the story or not. But let's just say it's some random old guy off the street. I would definitely have at least one interesting fact about them and one minor fact about them. And you could have one major fact, one minor fact. Are they helpful or harmful? And those are the kind of guidelines that I follow.
I gotcha. I plan a lot of things in simple terms. So like a lot of my NPCs, though you guys say like they're so interesting and they're so whatever, not to kind of applaud myself, but I'm just trying to pull the curtain back on that a little bit. A lot of my stuff is just like, what's their personality? What's their personality? What's their goal? And then sometimes I won't even have like the type of person that they are completely fleshed out. Like what ended up happening with Farley was completely like, that just kind of happened. Like I knew I wanted Farley to be a character who wanted to get close to get close to his son, but that's all I really had for him. And then he kind of just turned into this. Like I think Farley's probably the most real character, the most real feeling character to me. I think him and Cosmo are probably like, to me, like the most fleshed out in my head, but they were just kind of like broad concepts that I just kind of let evolve with the story, which I guess is a lot of what my style is for characters.
Where do you get your outside of goals and whatnot? Where do you get your character personalities from? Do you use cartoon and movie references, or do you just have a knack for character archetypes and voicings?
I think it's a mixture of both of them. I think most of the time when I get my personalities for the when I come up with personalities for the character, it's usually connected to what I need them to do at that moment. So like if I make a character in a tavern who is somebody with a lot of who has a lot of rumors, then I'll make a person who gossips a lot, and then I'll determine what type of gossip they are. Are they like are they a reliable gossip, or are they like somebody
flirty gossip?
Yeah, or flirty gossip. Yeah. So I would just figure out what type of character it is. But I think a lot of times the personality is just born from what I need from them to do at the moment, and then if they show up again, then I just add more to that until I have an idea of who they are.
That's why I like having the picture references. Sometimes I can find a voicing for that person better if I'm looking at the picture. I can see sort of like their personality and the way they dress and the way they hold themselves, and I can kind of imagine the way they would talk. But I have to reference movies. I have to.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I think for character references, sometimes I think a lot of times it does come from movies. Like I think Solidus was based off of the villain from Django Unchained, and who else? I think that's the only character I can think of that was clearly a movie reference. Maple I think was based off of I did like a respectful version of, I don't know if you've ever seen Friday, but the girl who yells at Craig over the phone, Maple is like a respectful version of that.
Yeah.
Mama was I was thinking like Miss Butterworth, but like
do the mama voice for me, baby.
Oh, baby, are you coming here to give mama some sugar, or do mama have to discipline her babies or something? Yeah. I don't remember what she says, but that's basically the voice.
Give me some sugar, baby.
Yeah, baby, don't. I can't think of anything, but but yeah, Mama was basically like mafia Mrs. Buttersworth. I wanted Southern hospitality with Mama because I wanted her to be like. I think the personality that I was kind of going for was Mama from Futurama, but I wanted to do like more Southern than that.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. I didn't even think about Mama from she did have those vibes, like those I control the world type vibes. Which is why I killed her.
Those you motherfucker. I loved her, man. I got art done. I was like, she gonna be a reoccurring villain, ally, and then she died. Okay, but yeah. Yeah. I think I do usually have like some type of reference from somewhere in my head.
Yeah, that was 3. 3 was I didn't get to plan that off that much. I think I got maybe two sessions in with him, but he was where did I draw it from? Scarface.
Was he Tony Montana?
Yes. That was kind of how I wanted to do it. Just a little less Cuban, a little more Hispanic, but the same sort of like personality. Amigo Hernandez Rodriguez Mariachi the third, but you can call me 3.
I like that.
But he, like, I just really wanted him to say some of those really. I was watching Scarface. I was like, man, this character's got so many great catch lines. I just want to use these for everything. And,
yeah, I get that.
And I'm not great with the Cuban accent, so I was like, I'll make him a little more Spanish, less Cuban, you know.
Yeah, whenever I do bad accents for D&D, I just call it fantasy. This is fantasy British, fantasy Scottish. Yeah. I just need a voice. I don't need it to be perfect.
Yeah, I can't do British, but my fantasy British is just taking a hold on. I can't even do it now because I'm thinking about it. But I just kind of I'll write British and then I end up just doing a very over pronunciated, softer American accent, and that's enough sometimes. It just gets me in a direction, right?
Yeah, my fantasy British voice for Talos when he first got conceived as an NPC, it was just like this fantasy British and like my trigger to start saying his lines was something he would never say, but it was the only way I can do the voice is I would have to say something like, "You American guys are so honey."
Oh God.
And that's basically how I could do his voice, something like that. But like it's not even good. But
we're gonna get ronded, baby.
You American guys are so horny.
Dude, that's a character archetype I really want to get into is Austin Powers.
What was I gonna say? So you were saying that Tony Montana, or wanting to say weird, well, not weird, but wanting to say really long, drawn out names was why you wanted to do 3?
Yeah, well, no, it was just I really wanted to get into a different accent, and I was like, say hello to my little friend. I can't, I could never do a Cuban thing, so I was like, all right, I could use that saying, that phrase to kind of get me into like a Hispanic kind of thing, and just kind of roll with that. And I was like, well, Hispanic, an Hispanic archetype is to have these like really over pronunciated names. So that's why I went for that, and then I was like, when it ended with mariachi, which actually just means band, right?
Yeah.
the third, I was like, we just call him 3 for short. And
I like that though.
And I just imagined like him being this satyr, or not satyr, Centaur, yeah. I just imagine him being this really dark skinned centaur with tattoos, and and I was upset that I didn't really get to play him that much, but I'll get to use him one day because he was really fun to play. And the only other one, like Rosie didn't really have an accent, he just had a personality. I think Dagger has a bit of an accent, and sometimes I accidentally flop between like my regular Southern where I grew up and the exaggerated Southern that I really wanted him to have, the more more Western Texas kind of Southern I wanted him to have. But like Talos, sometimes you have to give up on the over exaggerated stuff so that you can focus on the conversation at hand, and that's just ends up being what happens most of the time. Is I just ditch the accent a little bit to try to make sure that I can have a conversation.
Yeah, when Talos was first introduced into Evolution, I was trying really hard to keep the accent, but I just couldn't keep up because I had to keep thinking about how to say things.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
Yeah, but I will say that I created Tally just because I wanted to do that voice, just like how you made 3 just because you wanted to do the voice that you came up with. Like I wanted to do the
I don't even know what it is. Like Hispanic Cuban. I don't know. Hispanic Cuban. It's not even that. It's a very poor Hispanic accent. That's all.
Yeah. and Tally's voice is, I think, like Irish, maybe fantasy Irish ? He fucking bit me.
It's like Cockney, really.
Yeah, it's really Cockney. Yeah, it's Cockney. But yeah, I just wanted to do that voice, and it's a voice I can't do without screaming. So I know I can't do it all the time, but I just, I just want it to be that character.
Well, I think that's what makes characters though is if you don't lock yourself to a specific accent and just say, hey, I'm gonna be in this broad version of this accent, because like growing up in the South, we all Southern accents, but my neighbors, my half uncles that lived next to me, their whole family had a very specific way of talking, and I feel like that's a good character development thing, is to not lean into the accent 100% and let it be whatever it is, because then the character ends up having a different personality, and it helps set NPCs apart sometimes too when you're doing a bunch of them.
One advice I definitely will say, make sure if you're going to do some extra stuff with your character, make sure you can keep up with it, especially in high intensity situations, and don't be disappointed if you can't. Don't be disappointed if you come in with an idea for a character and it ends up being completely different.
Yeah, it happens.
Don't worry about tossing the whole accent all together and just being you, because that happens too.
Yeah, don't be discouraged.
I don't have to think about my Southern accent, so I can just do it. I can just do it.
Yeah, and Kipper's voice transformed so much throughout all of
No, I've never noticed it. Kipper's always Kipper. I identify Kipper by his roughness.
Yeah.
I've never noticed that he had an accent, because like you said, you probably have just been in and out. I've never noticed the accent. I've just noticed the gruffness, and so he's got a personality to him, and that's really what matters.
Yeah, Kipper has a very distinct personality. Like I can switch into Kipper real easy, and like I patented the Kipper potion because I can do it really good when I'm a little tipsy and drinking whiskey.
It gets in the character.
Just just help me get into character, and I kind of like over exaggerate certain words because I don't think anyone actually talks like this, but it's kind of like The Walking Dead. It was like the accents that they have on The Walking Dead is kind of my inspiration for it, because all those people are from England, and then they just try to have American Southern accents, so they exaggerate the fuck out of it.
I think they do a damn good job at their Southern accents. I have to say, they just over pronunciate some words that I just over pronunciated, because really I'd be saying over pronunciate.
Honestly, I don't even know what I'm doing laughing early. I feel like maybe it's something, but I'm not too sure, so I'm just sitting here existing.
Yeah, I think that's the point though. Like it's like, even though the accents aren't perfect, like it gives your character, it's how your character talks, and it's fine.
Yeah, just let it flow naturally. Yeah, and just like I said, with Kipper, he's always had this gruffness. So if you can just get the tone right, and keep that tone.
Yeah, just like, even I don't have nearly as deep as a voice as Mr. Talos over here does, but I still can have a character be recognized by the way they speak and the way they say certain things. Like you always have over here.
I would say also don't worry about I'm a guy, so I can't do girl voices very well. Like I think if you just play it as a girl, people will recognize that it's a girl. Like the
Oh, darling, can you come rub my feet and lick my toes?
But there's a level of disbelief that people will extend you if they're not dickholes.
Yes. But best believe, Guy will always be uncomfortable flirting with my female voice, and I will love every moment of that.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Oh man, it's definitely an experience, and I would say mostly for me, I haven't met a lot of female DMs in my time playing D&D, so it's definitely hard especially when the fantasy world is typically it's more profitable to be able to do awesome guy voices than to do flowery girl voices. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, but you can.
Absolutely not. But
That's true, yeah.
Until you're trying to make this really important NPC sexy as hell, and you can't manage to do it because you got too much low in your voice.
this absolutely voluptuous woman, flowing red hair. She walks in. What's up, dude?
She walks in, perfect body. You can see her curves. She wears this not see-through but very revealing dress, and she walks in and she's like, "So what's going on, y'all?"
Hey, baby.
What's going on, sugar?
What's going on?
Barbs will go down in history.
Yeah, Barb is amazing.
I'm single and I'm ready to mingle.
So there's a lot more I still want to talk about, but I need to take a break.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a good point to end it. We've been talking for 2 hours.
It'd be good. We can come back to it.
And we can do another one for sure. Maybe we can focus it on a specific topic or whatever. I don't know. We release this. Maybe if you guys got anything you want advice on between all of us, or something you want us to expand on, we'll happily oblige for sure.
Yes, please leave it in the questions, comments, and concerns. And we will throw away the concerns and just read the questions and comments.
Yes, and all of this I feel like the internet needs this for some reason. It's all of our opinion and our specific way that we do things. If you have your own method that works for you, do your method. We're not saying throw your shit away because we have this way. I just think being open to other perspectives of how other people do it is helpful for planning and adjusting and stuff.
And just make sure that when you're listening to us, you do it with a cold beer.
Yeah, but yeah, I think a good next one will probably be about learning how to adjust to your players. Maybe when your players throw you a good way to do yes and without it being destroying your world.
Also, dealing with problem players.
Yeah, that'd be a good one too. We had our fair share for sure.
And I want to talk about using other forms of media to set the mood.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, we got ideas. We'll do another one. But if y'all got some stuff y'all want us to talk about specifically, or any specific questions, we'll be happy to oblige. I'd be cool to tell you about voices and distincting your characters or whatever. I don't know, just whatever, man.
Well, my name is H3ritic, and this has been A Night with H3ritic. Thank you all. I have to pee now.
All right, let's wrap up the DM panel. So at Subsaccharin on Twitter, at Black Chinchilla on Twitter.
Don't add me on Twitter because I'm not using Twitter, but find me on YouTube at The Professor H3ritic with a 3, H3ritic.
Yes. I think that's it, right? You got anything you want to plug? Sub? I guess not.
My SoundCloud.
All right. Deuces to all you silly.
I'm going to go pee now.
All right. Bye.